If you have seen in the picture, he is author of a book in Invest REITs, which reached popular top 10 non-fiction seller, and your photo show that you're doing a book launch, right? Popular.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and he also speaks very regularly for financial institutions. He's a full-time investor, author, trainer, have been investing in Bursa international markets since 1995. So that is a little bit about his background. So today, what he is going to cover, if I know it correctly, is you're going to talk about how we can explore the outlook of plantation industry.
Yeah.
All right. And then he will share with us how we can determine the risks and rewards of investing in the plantation industry. And we will also learn what the future holds for the plantation industry. Okay. Now the question now is, if you're aware, over the past 1 to 2 years, you've seen that crude palm oil price plunging down very severely, right? Now I think it's doing at about 2,100 ringgit.
Yeah, it's also because of the trade war that helped to elevate it a bit. But as soon as there's talk about trade deal and so forth, there's no longer the push to push the oil price, the crude palm oil price higher. So let's see what the industry holds.
Yeah. So if you have not yet invested in the plantation industry and you want to see whether it is worth to invest or not, and in this session, PC will share more with you. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is the plantation industry outlook. But before I talk about outlook, can you tell us what exactly is a plantation industry and what is the products revolve around?
Yeah, the plantation industry specific focus here will be palm oil, which they also goes into, besides the crude palm oil, there's also the oleochemicals, and there's also the all the way, it's similar like the oil and gas, where they have upstream, midstream, and downstream. So we'll be exploring those key products, for example, crude palm oil, oleochemicals, as well as the most challenging one is actually the palm oil diesel. Yeah, so that product itself is also facing tremendous challenges moving ahead.
Okay, so can you tell us how is our palm oil export doing?
Okay, when you look at the most recent market figures here, Malaysia total palm oil export reached 998 billion in 2018, okay, rising 6.7% versus 2017. Now, palm oil products export contributed 65.4 billion, and that's according to the Malaysia Palm Oil Board, or 6.6% of total exports. When we compare to 2017 total value of palm oil products, export actually fell 12.4%, mainly due to lower prices. Now, in 2017, palm oil products export accounted for 8% of Malaysia total exports. The plantation may not seem to be on the same so-called economy in terms of total export. It may not be in the same class like the oil and gas, but that is also substantial because it counts for 8% of Malaysia total exports. Now, in terms of tonnage, total palm oil products export in 2018 amounted to 24.9 million tons versus 2017, or 24 million tons, an increase of 3.8%. But because there's recent news came out that China has agreed to buy Malaysia palm oil, increasing the purchase by about 50%, with a total value of about 891 million US dollars. That could see the projection, becoming higher in 2019. So, but what is the importance of palm oil and its usage? Now, as you can see that, palm oil, we actually sell crude, and then from crude, it goes into various industry applications, okay? And it goes all the way to becoming ingredients for baking, ingredients for frying, and also ingredients for the making of detergent, soap, and such, yeah? So if you look at the palm oil outlook in 2019, now according to the Malaysian Palm Oil Council, MPOC in a report published in 19 February 2019. Now, palm oil prices are expected to be steady at an average price of around 2,303 US ringgit per ton, or US dollar of $656 per ton. Global output is expected to rise by 3 million tons to 72 million tons. Now, Malaysia palm oil export is expected to rise to 17.2 million tons this year, mainly due to rise in demand from primary markets. But again, this figure may actually go up in view that China has agreed to increase the import of palm oil from Malaysia. So this could be good news and a boost to the plantation sector in terms of revenue. Now, the Malaysian Palm Oil Board forecast production to grow to 20.3 million tons in 2019 due to favorable weather conditions. So if you look at the global vegetable oil consumption, palm oil is actually number one, okay, and then the soybean is actually number two, and rapeseed oil is actually number three. So regardless, there are a lot of competition from other type of vegetable oil. Palm oil still remains the most consumed and most popular among consumers. Yeah, and this data is actually from Statista. Now, global vegetable oil production and palm oil. Now, the first chart you can see that from 2016 onwards, there's a lot of expansion in terms of plantation, and therefore, because the global vegetable oil production being increased steadily since 2003, and you can see that palm oil production has been outpacing other vegetable oil because it's on the top rung of the production. Yeah, but 2016 actually marked the higher, bigger expansion. Okay, as you can see towards the tail end of the chart, and that it coincides with the palm oil price falling, okay, over the same period. Now, because of the trade war with China, palm oil actually got a minor lift from the bottom towards the end of 2018. Now, when all other sectors in the vegetable oil industry, okay, they also continue to expand, and this would cause a cap on the palm oil price moving forward, because there's just when there's overproduction, then definitely the loss of supply and demand applies, and therefore the price could be under pressure because more production are put into the market. Yeah, so let's look at Malaysia palm oil export. Now, 2014, we export 17.3 million tons, valued at 44.5 billion ringgit. In 2015, it is 17.5 million tons at 41.3 billion. 2016, 60 million tons at 43.4 billion ringgit. 2017, 16.6 million tons at 50 billion ringgit. Then 2018, 16.5 million tons, 41.0 billion.
Yeah.
So you can see that even as our export between 2018 and 2017, there's not much difference, but then the price in value actually fell by almost 9 billion.
Because the
ringgit.
palm oil price go down.
Yes, yes. So that's why when the industry, when we talk about palm oil plantation, when we look at a decade ago, there's always news that Malaysia is exploring into Africa and so forth. But the most recent one, even countries in the tropical regions in South America, they are also looking into the palm oil plantation. And that's why when you have a lot of entrance into the market, a lot of people would actually create, when there are too many planters, okay, it will create a huge supply, and therefore it will put a price on the price of crude palm oil. So if you look at it, palm oil export has declined versus previous years, okay, from 2014 to 2018. and faces challenges in the form of lower prices and anti-palm oil activism and lobbyists from developed nations. So often there's this uh, challenge, okay, from the Western or developed nations who actually try to sell their own vegetable oil, and therefore, unfortunately, palm oil is singled out as a reason for them to lobby against palm oil because they link it with deforestation and so forth, yeah, and also the exploitation of indigenous people worldwide. So, but they are also protecting their own market of vegetable oil, for example, soybean oil as well as rapeseed oil, sunflower oil, and such. Yeah, so it's a very intense battle. So global overproduction is also ongoing issue, and this needs to be addressed.
Yeah, because every country is producing more
Yes,
to sell
yes,
more of this
yes.
value.
So that's one of the key thing. Yeah. So in terms of oleochemicals demand, now global oleochemicals market is projected to reach 28.6 billion by 2025, according to a new report by Granville Research. Demand is driven by growing biochemical product in various consumer applications such as personal care, detergents, food and beverage. Now, Asia Pacific was the leading consumer of oleochemicals. Okay, this region is also expected to witness the fastest growth over the next 8 years, owing to abundant raw material supply and significant developments in the application markets such as personal care, food and beverage, and biochemical manufacture. Now, Asia Pacific also has one of the world's fastest growing population. Okay, later on, towards the end, I will share with you the demographic of the next decade in terms of Asia middle class. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will say that the 19th century belongs to British, UK,
Yeah.
20th century belong to
Yeah.
US, and the 21st century belong to
It could be
Asia,
it
China.
could be China.
Yeah.
Okay, but the surprise would be towards 2030. There's two entrants into the fastest growing middle class, which is actually India
India.
and Indonesia.
Mm.
Okay, which I will share with you later on. Yeah. So palm oil and oleochemicals. Yeah, let's look at it. Malaysia palm oil based oleochemicals export 2014 is 2.83 million tons. Okay, 2015 is 2.85. Okay, that's not much change. Okay, then 2016 is 2.76 million tons, and there's a slight uptick in terms of value of 12.7 billion. 2017, 2.77 million tons at 15.5 billion ringgit. Then 2018, 3 million tons, but 14.3 billion ringgit. So because of the lower price of crude palm oil, it also exerts a certain pressure on the price of oleochemicals as well. Because if let's say for example like oil, okay, the normal oil and gas, okay, if let's say oil price increase, yeah, even down to the retailer, the oil price would also increase. Yeah. Similarly, crude palm oil is also no different, and it impacts also the price of oleochemicals. Now, although palm oil-based oleochemicals export increased in 2018 versus previous year, total value has fallen short due to lower prices. When we talk about palm oil and biodiesel, okay, Malaysia palm oil-based biodiesel export 2014 is 87.4 kilotons, okay, value at 257 million ringgit. 2015 is 178.9 kilotons, which is 483. Now that's a huge increase, yeah, of almost more than doubling, yeah.
Mm.
So 2016 is 83.6 kilotons at 247. Now 2016 it dropped back, okay. 2017 it went back up again, 235.3 kilotons, value at 777 million ringgit. Yeah.
Wow,
So
like roller coaster, up
yeah.
and down.
So 2018, 515.5 kilotons at 1.43 billion ringgit. So actually, in terms of value, it has increased quite a lot, but that coincides with increase in volume. So biodiesel export seems to be gaining strength, but by 2020, EU nations cannot increase their import of biodiesel. Okay, now this is a warning sign.
Bad
Okay?
news.
Yeah. And after 2023, the demand will gradually decline until 2030, when demand will come to a halt. Now, this is from the Transport and Environment published on the 2nd of July 2018. So while there's a lot of demand for biodiesel right now, okay, because of the requirement in the European Union to have blended uh, fuel for vehicles. So that's why there's a demand, okay, to rush in to meet certain deadlines, okay. But then by 2023, they cannot increase the import anymore from of biodiesel, okay, and then will decline, and 2030 demand will altogether stop. Okay, now this will result in biodiesel losing the lucrative EU market. This will impact all types of biodiesel, including palm oil-based biodiesel.
So those manufacturers that can produce biodiesel from palm oil in Malaysia has to have a backup plan on how they can utilize the existing fixed asset on that.
Yeah, so that's why, because of all these so-called policies coming forward, I think Malaysia plantation companies have to be very, very nimble, okay, and constantly look for new markets for their products.
And EU is a big market for Malaysia. I think it's the second biggest market.
Yeah, if you look at the EU palm oil consumption, okay, you can see that from the chart, EU has been ramping up import of biodiesel, okay, which is the darker color, okay. But this will start to decline from 2023 onwards and halt by 2030. Now, in the meantime, food, feed, and industry consumption is also gradually declining. Okay, I think partly there are a few reasons. Okay, one is that the negative impact from the lobbyists. Okay, because they try to lobby for other vegetable oil. Okay, and they painted a lot of negative information about Malaysia or Asia, or about palm oil globally. Okay, that is affecting the forests in the South America, Africa, and also in Asia. So it is a very ongoing battle. Okay,
we should get our minister to go there and lobby again.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are the challenges confronting biodiesel? Now, world is moving towards clean energy, which is a reduction in emission. Okay, natural gas, solar, wind, tide, hydro, and geothermal are leading the green energy evolution. More nuclear plants are being built to reduce dependence on fossil fuel. Okay. Between 2025 and 2050, European nations such as, including other countries like China and India, are expected to ban all ICE, which is internal combustion engine vehicles. Okay, which means it's going to be going fully electric. So there's really no need, okay, to add biodiesel to blend with existing fuel. Okay, and on top of that, whether biodiesel can be used for let's say energy generation, okay, that is also not so feasible, owing to a shift now, a global move towards natural and renewables. Okay, so then the other thing confronting the challenges of biodiesel is that all the clean energy and policies, okay, will alter the landscape in oil consumption. And outside of a major geopolitical crisis, oil price is likely to stay low in the future. Now, this could impact the demand for biodiesel. So if let's say oil price is really down, it's really low, okay, and then to blend biodiesel is a costly thing. People will just do a cost-benefit analysis, and maybe they might just opt for ordinary fossil fuel and not a bio-based fuel.
So you say oil price will stay low in the future,
Yeah.
What is your time horizon?
I think for oil price up to 2025, I think we can see some good price in the crude oil, yeah, in oil, mainly because of a lot of the U.S. shale oil producers, they are facing a lot of tremendous challenge in the debt burden, and a lot of the debt will come due between this year and 2023. So also the best part of the Permian Basin, Eagle Ford Basin, they have already taken all the best part of the oil out. Okay, so now they have to actually, they actually have to come up with newer technology and more costly venture to actually break up the remaining parts of the shale oil. In fact, U.S. oil production has already reached a peak and is coming down. So because of something will happen to the U.S. shale industry, oil price would actually stay quite on an uptrend if I think so, if I may think so, okay, over the next few years. So in that sense, okay, biodiesel would still be having a role in the market. But as soon as the shift goes into electric vehicle and the banning of ICE, then you will see a gradual fall in demand of oil as well as the need for biodiesel.
So what you're talking now is actually pretty long term lah, because like 2025 is like still
Yeah,
6 years
yeah,
ahead from now.
yeah.
And then you mean the oil price will likely to stay low is probably looking at about 10 years
Yes.
and onwards.
After 2025, when the first few countries in the European Union will start to implement fully electric vehicles, yeah, and that would actually then cause oil price to fall. But of course, when we talk about between now and then, there will be advancement in technology, okay, and maybe certain technology would suddenly be would require either biodiesel or the traditional crude oil, okay, in order to produce something. We don't know, but based on existing conditions, okay, and with the implementation of full banning of ICE in European nations will come first in 2025. Then, of course, where 62/3 of the global oil consumption is used for vehicles, then that would definitely impact upon the price of oil and also biodiesel in that sense. Yeah. So the other thing is stigma against biodiesel, because land use for biodiesel could be used to farm for food, especially when population growth puts stress on global food supply chain, resulting in inflation. Okay, and even right now, there's a lot of attacks against Malaysian or Malaysian plantation companies about them partaking in deforestation and so forth. Okay, but again, let's say in US, the kind of corn oil used for ethanol in the US, the amount of land that they use to produce corn oil just for another biofuel product, okay, is actually enough to feed a large population. Instead of converting corn into fuel, they use corn into food. So then again, it's like because of interest, some are fighting for soybean, some are fighting for corn oil. Therefore, it's much easier to label against palm oil because they can always use that in terms of deforestation. Okay, so that's one thing. On the other is that all this use of bioproduct, okay, also will put pressure on the global food supply chain in the future, because arable land in the world is actually limited. Yeah, but there's one prospect, okay, and that is to convert palm oil feedstock into biomass for power generation. Now, this is another sector I think is rather young, and I think that instead of just thinking of converting crude palm oil, okay, into biodiesel, and the other thing is look at biomass, okay, for power generation. In China, for example, they are using agricultural feedstocks that are used, for example, like if you look at it, like rice, after they've taken the rice out, okay, the stalks and all those are used for biomass to generate power. Okay, so that's one thing to consider. Okay, in using after they have extracted the oil, what is left over can be used as feedstock for biomass in terms of power generation. Then you can actually, for example, a plantation company may also, on one hand, use the mill the fruit bunches and then have the oil, but then the extracted oil, they can also use it for biomass to actually generate electricity for the whole maybe oleochemical plant and so on to reduce the cost. So a lot of industry worldwide right now are changing. Okay, for example, some industry in China, while they are using a feedstock, their factory flat rooftop is being used as a solar farm so that they are able to use the electricity generating from solar power to save costs. Okay, so that's one thing to consider also, how to recycle back. Okay, and what's left of the fruit bunches after the extraction of oil. Okay, when you use it for biomass, power generation is also another option. Yeah. So risk and rewards in plantation investing.
Yeah, can you tell us like more about that?
Yeah. So if you look at it, okay, palm oil is a commodity and therefore is exposed to the cyclical demand and supply. Okay, higher demand often result in overplanting and therefore creates long-term damage to the price. Now, this is again the same chart which I shared just now. You can see that because oil price was started to move up, okay, during the 2014 to 2015 period, you can see that there's acceleration in opening up new plantations.
So the production keep increasing over years.
Yeah, so that's why eventually it caused the price to fall. Okay, so when you have overplanting, okay, or even whatever resources, whether over mining or over drilling, over production, often will create a cap on the progression of the price. And then if let's say it reaches a certain limit, then you can only go and that one way you can only go and that's down. Okay, so challenges confronting biodiesel could also pose a risk to further downside in terms of price. Okay, competition from other vegetable oil which could erode demand of palm oil, negative PR by lobbyists in developed nations against palm oil. So these are the risks that sometimes are associated with plantation investing. Yeah. So let's look at the rewards. Palm oil has multi-usage with many industrial applications, and therefore its demand is likely to increase over time, especially when you talk about detergents, when you talk about consumable oil. Okay, for example, oil used for frying, baking. Okay, and in terms of personal hygiene, yes, then there will be constant demand for oleochemicals. Yeah. As reported by Granville Research, Asia Pacific will see the fastest growth in demand for oleochemicals in the next 8 years. This is also the same region which will see the fastest growth in population and also the biggest increase in middle income earners in the coming decade. Growth in middle income earners will also augur new consumption patterns, especially in the demand for better food and beverage, personal hygiene care, and industrial manufacturing. Now, if we want to compare, we can just refer to Malaysia export to China before 1990s, and also Malaysia export to China now, because the consumption pattern has changed. Okay, previously when a country is less developed, the people, the middle income group is very, very small. You don't have people thinking about eating pastry. You don't have people thinking about personal care products. Okay, if you just have soap, then that's enough. Right now, there are so many personal care products. Okay, because they have moved up the value chain. So that's why, as long as the middle income earners in Asia Pacific continue to grow, that demand will actually continue to grow as well.
That will be a good news for us.
Yeah. So hopefully, if let's say biodiesel starts to taper off over the next decade, but because of the growth in middle income earners in the Asia Pacific region, that will actually offset some of the negative impact of the biodiesel being less popular in the European nations. Yeah. Now all this could lead to even greater demand for palm oil in the future, which helps to stabilize the price. Now, how do we weigh the risk and rewards? Okay. And what you need to do is knowing how to weigh your criteria in investing in a plantation. Now, you can consider some of this. How to reduce risks, which are subjected to cyclical fluctuation in prices. Multiple income streams, upstream to downstream versus single income stream, whether it's upstream, midstream, or just downstream only. So on one hand, you need to understand the risk. Okay, then you want to look at multiple income streams so that it helps to reduce the risk further.
Can you tell us what is an upstream in a palm oil plantation?
Okay, like upstream could be like in the preparing the seedling. Okay, then in terms of harvesting and all those. Midstream would be in the
upstream will mean they own many hectares or
yes,
acres.
Yes, they need to
few tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Of,
so you need to prepare the land. Okay, you need to prepare the land. Okay, you need to grow the seedling, transform the seedling into the plantations. Okay, then harvesting. Okay, but then midstream will be in terms like milling. Okay, then downstream
crunching it, make sure that the oil extract the oil.
Yes, downstream is when that crude palm oil is converted into different types of chemicals. Okay, to suit products needs. Yeah.
Okay, so if you were to invest, like which sector, upstream, midstream, or downstream, which one is safer or more defensive?
I think for me, I would look at an all-rounder. Okay.
All-rounder.
Yeah, they are involved in everything, vertically integrated. Because you must understand that if you are just selling crude palm oil, okay, if the price is low, then your revenue would react accordingly. But if let's say you also have downstream, okay, in terms of production of oleochemicals, as the population grows, the demand will be there. Okay, but then because of overplanting, the crude palm oil, although demand may be rising, but then the crude palm oil price may not rise enough. But because you are in the oleochemical production and there's a lot of, you have a wide population that consume the product, then the quantity, although the price may not increase a lot, but then by the sheer quantity of the population consumption, then that would actually help to support the revenue. Yeah.
Yeah, but if the palm oil price go up, I think the upstream business will be very well.
Yeah,
right?
But
the downstream business will not be so happy, right? Because they need to buy more expensive palm oil from.
That's why if let's say it's vertically integrated, it's just like left pocket go right pocket. It's the same company. So that's why in terms of if I want to spread the risk across, I will look at a fully vertically integrated plantation player. Okay.
Do we have them in Malaysia market?
Yes. After I share one particular company. So the other thing is that companies must look at high cost efficiencies across the broad business spectrum. So a company must be able to achieve cost efficiencies, okay, in their operations, whether in terms of the upstream, midstream, or downstream. Okay, highly successful company with strong management team. You want to look at companies that have a very strong management team and dedicated management team, and this is reflected how good a company is. Okay, whether they have a good management team, you can always look at like the trend 5-year trend report, or that they have the equity. Okay, the equity value did not drop too drastically, or that the equity value has gained over a period of time. So when a management team is good, they will actually grow the shareholders' equity. Okay, and that's a very important thing. Okay, because then growing the equity adds value to the company. You invest, you want a company that adds value to the equity so that it's the share price would also react according to the increase in the equity. Yeah. So another thing, of course, is a company with proven track record. Okay. So today's case study will look at KL Kepong. Now, before we start, okay, this is not a buy call for KL Kepong. Yeah, it's just that I'm using it as an example of a vertically integrated company. Okay. So listed on Bursa, main board under code 2445, one of the biggest players in the palm oil industry. Has a plantation land bank that is close to 285,000 hectares spread across Malaysia, Peninsula and Sabah, Indonesia, which is in Belitung Island, Sumatra, Central and East Kalimantan, and Liberia, which is actually in Africa. Okay, over the years, KLCare vertically integrated its upstream and downstream businesses. It has expanded its manufacturing to cover Malaysia, China, Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Indonesia, resulting in internationally scaled oleochemicals operations. Okay, now so sometimes there are certain pluses in having a plant overseas, in the sense that whatever you ship there is towards that particular plant and immediately is processed, catering to the consumers there. Okay, rather than you when you want to do everything here, and when you export, there's always the problem with transportation and also the period to transport. Yeah, so that's why sometimes bigger companies would like to relocate their plant directly to where their customers are located. So if you look at the location of operations, okay, in terms of it's all over Southeast Asia mostly. Okay, sorry, Liberia is actually in it's actually in West Africa. Okay, I thought for a while that map was South Africa. Okay, it's in Africa. Yeah. So then if you look at it, okay, their presence, their product is all over Europe, China, and Southeast Asia. So what is their operations now? It is from nursery, planting, okay, and then field upkeep, to harvesting, processing, to GHG management and R&D. So it's actually all integrated together within the same company, various departments here. So if you look at the Q1 2019 results, if we look at the income statement, now despite this falling revenue, which you can see that is the revenue for the financial year 2019, yeah, okay, is 4 billion versus 5 billion the previous year. Okay, although revenue is short, yeah, share results from associates and JV help to move the net profit higher year on year, which you can see that down below. Okay, now this is why having multiple income streams are very important. Okay, so if you look at the Q1 2019 balance sheet, now why you need to look at the balance sheet? Because the balance sheet is a tool to measure a company's financial soundness. Okay, that's very important. Yeah. A lot of people sometimes look at the income statement, okay, then they look at the PE, and then they make their decision. But the balance sheet is very important because it is a tool to measure a company's financial soundness.
And if I may add on, especially for plantation industry, which are more asset-driven kind of business,
yes,
and for balance sheet should be more important because unlike services or e-commerce, digital services, plantation, you really need to invest in acquiring the land, planting
building the plant. Building the plant,
so
and all those,
balance sheet will be crucial.
Yes,
to understand the health of the company.
Yeah, because some companies they may incur a lot of debt in initiating let's say an oleochemical plant, because it costs a lot of money. They will incur a lot of debt. Okay, and if let's say their business is debt driven, then that company is more at risk. Okay, so let's look at financial strength. Now, how do you assess a plantation company's financial strength? Okay, versus via the balance sheet. Number one is plantation is a capital intensive industry requiring funds for acquisition of land and building processing plants, including chemical plants. Now, a plantation company therefore should have the following criteria: current ratio, which is the current assets over the current liabilities, of more than 1. Okay, now why I say it needs to be more than 1? This is your criteria. Yes, yes, this is my personal criteria. Okay, you can set your own criteria, but I'm just sharing my criteria in this regard. Now, why do I say they need to be more than 1? Because current liabilities is commitments that the company must fulfill, okay, to over a 12-month period. Now, if let's say your current assets is lower than the commitment that you have to pay out, okay, then how is the company going to meet that commitment? So if let's say it cannot be satisfied by increase in earnings, then what next would be likely solution, increase in debt. So that's why for my criteria, list of criteria, this is one of those that the current ratio must always be more than 1. Okay, so this is a measure of the adequacy of company assets to meet current commitment. Okay, debt to equity ratio, which is the total liabilities over total equity, must be less than 1.5. Now I put it at 1.5 again. It's my own personal criteria because if let's say it's because a company that is in the plantation business, they incur debt definitely. So if you put the debt to equity ratio over that must be less than 1, it's not really very practical because the amount of borrowing could well exceed that because they need a longer time frame to actually pay off their borrowing. So therefore, I put it at 1.5. Okay, it measures the extent of a leverage in a company. Okay, now these are my personal benchmarks. Okay, KLK in this case has a current ratio of 2.19. Okay, more than sufficient funds to meet current liabilities, and a debt to equity ratio of 0.6. Therefore, meeting my personal benchmark for financial strength. Okay, this is how I look at a company to evaluate their financial strength. Now, you can actually change the let's say if you want to measure the company with more stringent requirement, you can put current ratio must be more than 1.2. It's also up to you. If you want to be you do not want to be so nitpicky. You say that as long as the company make money is okay. I don't if their current ratio doesn't meet that 1, it's also okay. I maybe put it at 0.8. Okay, that is your whatever criteria you set. Bear in mind, it is your own acceptance of your own risk level. Okay, so if you put 0.8, yes, you are someone that is, has more aversion for risk. Okay, that you don't mind. Okay, to take risk. Okay, but some people might put 1.2, so that they want even a safer company for them to consider before investing. Yeah, so these are some things that you can use to evaluate and also put in the figures that meets your own risk acceptance. Yeah. Now, other metrics. Now, it is important that a company must be cash flow positive. In this regard, KLK's operating cash flow is 234 million in Q1 2019 versus negative 79 million a year ago. Now, negative cash flow from operating activities may be a concern, but if the cash flow is used for business expansion, then that could be good for a company. Because sometimes companies may see that there's an opportunity to really expand a particular segment, okay, and therefore they take that as an opportunity, and it's okay for them to burn that to use up that cash flow for that business expansion. And some companies may be just focus in accumulating cash. So it's up to you to evaluate, how important it is. For example, if let's say it's negative cash flow, then you must find out the reason why is there a negative cash flow. Okay, if you find out the reason, hey, the company use it for expansion, they actually expanded their business, they expanded their marketing, they use it to fight against the lobbies or whatsoever, anything that is being used for a reason. As long as it's a good reason, then even though for that particular quarter it's a negative cash flow, do not be too overly concerned. What you need to do then, okay, is the next quarter. If the next quarter is back to positive, then there's really no need to be too overly concerned. But if consistently every quarter is negative cash flow, then you need to be a bit more attentive to what is being spent. Yeah. So the other thing is price to earning ratio, but price to earning ratio is often very that you just look at, for example, people would say that a PE less than 15 is very, very good. Okay, if PE more than 15, then don't buy, is overvalued. Now that is very subjective. Okay, because certain ICT companies, because of their profile of their high growth nature, they tend to have higher PE. Okay, so people invest in companies because they want to look at the future. If everyone is piling into the company, yes, the price to earning ratio will be much higher. Okay, so but how do you know that it's actually high? That is why you need to compare with peers. And in this sense, okay, we look at the PE ratio for KLK, which is 38.66, IOI Corp is 40.16, United Plantation is 15.29, Sime Plantation is 66.62. Okay, so what you can see is that, hey, United Plantation actually have a very, very low PE. So should I then invest in United Plantation? Fair enough. If let's say if you do a comparison, United Plantation has a much lower PE, and that certainly aroused your curiosity, then you go back to the same method in evaluating its income statement, in evaluating its balance sheet to make sure that United Plantation meets the criteria that you have set. Okay, so but one thing, any measurement involving EBITDA needs further scrutiny as it exempts items which could impact a company's bottom line. So sometimes companies, they have no net profit to report. Okay, so what they do, they use EBITDA. Okay, because, for example, why I don't like to use EBITDA measurements here is because it's earnings before interest, depreciation, taxation, and amortization. Now, if a company incurs a lot of debt, definitely if the interest will be very high. So if I take out that portion of the interest, hey, suddenly my earnings would look better, isn't it? The same if let's say a company use a lot of debt to invest in plant and machinery, the depreciation will also be very high. So if I take out interest, if I take out depreciation, okay, then I could be positive, having a positive EBITDA. So that's why, when it comes to EBITDA, you need to really be very, very cautious. Okay, but for my own assessment of companies, I actually totally ignore EBITDA because I want to see the hard real facts of the net profit, which is more important to me. Okay, again, it's my preference. Yeah.
So EBITDA is something that Wall Street people invented so that the number is better, right?
Yes. So just like Wall Street invent, if you look at CNBC, Bloomberg, you see that every time they announce EPS, they never announce what is the total net profit or net profit growth. They just use EPS. Why? Because since 2009 to present, for the whole 10 years, Wall Street companies, okay, listed on the S&P index or Dow or whatever, they've been using that to buy back their shares. So that now, okay, if I'm not wrong, essentially total corporate debt in the US right now is higher than the corporate debt during the 2008 financial crisis. So that's why some companies, they just use EPS. Of course, if you use debt to buy back shares, the number of shares in circulation is reduced. So of course, earnings would actually go up. So net profit may not go up, but earning per share may go up. So you have to be very discerning in that matter. Okay. So Wall Street like to come up with a lot of things that just to push the stock price higher. And thankfully, sometimes Malaysia has more scrutiny over this kind of things. And thankfully, a lot of people still pay attention when Malaysian companies are concerned. When you're investing in Bursa, the common sense still prevail in that people still look at, hey, net profit growth lah, revenue growth lah, and all those. Don't just look at EPS, okay?
Because we still need to take into consideration of the depreciation, which are non-cash expense, and all the interest that the company will serve for all the debt that they borrow. So but we look at all the PE ratio from 4 PE ratio that I've shared from these 4 companies, it appears to me that the plantation industry PE ratio is still relatively on the high side.
Yeah.
Even though the price of the crude palm oil has been falling.
Yeah.
And the PE ratio, surprisingly, is still can still sustain at above 30 over.
Yeah, I think sometimes people buy into it for multiples of reasons. Okay, one is that some investors may see that plantation is a very steady business. Okay, there's constant demand. Okay, and as I shared with you just now, a chart from Statista. Okay, palm oil consumption. Okay, in terms of vegetable oil consumption, palm oil is still number one in the world. So when you are faced with this kind of facts, people will think that, hey, yeah, the price may be down and all that, but palm oil is still number one. Yeah. So I want stability in my portfolio. Okay, and also certain counters do pay good dividends now. So that's why that people want to go into plantation, because it's for security. For us, for example, okay, people would want to have a portfolio of a combination of stocks, and sometimes plantation may be the foundation that they want to, because it's always in demand. Okay, although price might fall, but then there's always a need for palm oil. Okay, and therefore it provides a kind of a safety net. Okay, for your investment, and that's why people would actually want to have, hey, no matter what my portfolio, I want to have a bit of plantation. Okay, and that's why there's this demand for it. Okay, of course, a lot of people are also looking forward that price of crude palm oil may one day move up. Okay, and then they will reap the benefit. So again, people may be positioning in advance or something. Okay, so depends on the behavior of the investor. Okay.
Yeah. So now, before we go into the plantation industry future, let's do a quick poll. Okay. So the question here I have is, on your screen, do you think plantation company share price will go up in this year? I mean, we are talking about a sector, the sector-based kind of outlook. So, right, do you think whether the share price will go up in this year? I'm just doing a survey. So, if you think it's definitely yes, you have firm belief that it will go up, click definitely yes. If you have firm belief that it will still drop, click definitely no. If you are in between, maybe you say I'm not sure. Okay, give you about another 15 seconds. Okay, let me close the poll and share the result with you. So based on the opinion of all our a few hundred online attendees tonight, you see that 33% of you say the share price will go up. Sector outlook should be better this year. I mean the share price. 25% of you say no, and while 42% of you say I'm not sure. Okay, so this is the answer, the opinion from the online attendees today. All right, so let me go back to the slide. So yeah, so could you, PC, just now you cover KLK as one of the case studies to share with us what you said. Vertically integrated palm oil company, and you also cover a bit more on a few products earlier on, like biodiesel and oleochemicals and stuff. Can you tell us whether what is your outlook for this plantation industry?
Okay, now what I'm going to talk about for the future, okay, has a lot to do with science.
Science.
Okay. Now,
wow, today you're a scientist.
Yeah. This is something that I think a lot of people will not find it in the mainstream media. Okay, because there's a lot of undercurrents of what's happening globally, and it has to do with scientific, some scientific research done. Okay, so maybe you can later we can also poll. Have anyone ever heard about solar minimum and grand solar minimum?
What are these two things?
Yeah. So actually,
it sounds like climate change kind of stuff.
Yes, very much so. Okay. Now, previously, recent years, the sun actually have sunspots. Yeah. When sunspots actually denote the activity in the sun. But recently, there have not been any sunspots. and that means that the sun is going to go undergoing some changes.
So when you see recently, referred specifically to like when?
I think just about a year or so ago that this grand solar minimum theory started to come out, because the sun has, scientists have been monitoring the surface of the sun for many, many years, okay, but they noticed something very real happening, and therefore right now there's a lot of scientists that are suggesting that we could be having a grand solar minimum.
What is the grand solar minimum?
Okay, what it is. Now, so if you want to know a bit more, okay, you can go to the grandsolarminimum.com and read more about it. Okay, now roughly every 11 years, the sun's magnetic field completely flips. Okay, which means that the sun north and south poles switch places. Okay, it then takes approximately another 11 years for the sun north and south poles to flip back again.
So that means the
magnetic pole actually changed.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this solar cycle affects activity on the surface of the sun, such as sunspots, which are caused by the sun magnetic fields. And as the magnetic fields change, so does the amount of activity on the sun's surface. Now, the amount of activity on the sun's surface can influence the Earth's temperature and thus its weather conditions. Okay, you can see that on the red side, that's called the modern minimum, okay, which happened during the 17th to 18th century. Okay, then we have the sunspots, okay, being prevalent, and then you see the blue lines. Okay, that means that the sunspot activity. But recently, okay, if you go after the year 2000, you can see that the activity in the sun is actually dropping. So, what is grand solar minimum? Now, in the Global Warming Policy Foundation in 2018 October, Professor Valentina Zakova gave a presentation of a climate and the solar magnetic field hypothesis. Yeah, Zakova models solar sunspot and magnetic activity. That's what she does. Yeah, her models have run at 93% accuracy, and her findings suggest a super grand solar minimum could begin in 2020.
So not only a grand solar minimum, but a super grand solar minimum.
A super grand solar minimum could have 4 magnetic fields out of phase. That was about 40 to 60 years of cold weather 350 years ago. So we are talking about decades, Okay.
No, it's not decades. There are 3 centuries, right?
No. 40 to 60 years of cold. We are talking about decades of cold.
Oh, okay.
Okay, which happened 350 years ago. Now, this was the modern minimum, okay, of lower solar activity. The historical cold weather had 2 magnetic fields out of phase. Right now, we are talking about 4. So that's why people say that the grand solar minimum could be heralding a mini ice age.
Are you kidding us?
Yeah. Okay.
2020, then we don't have to buy aircon
2020
anymore.
onwards. Now, it could.
Now I still feel very hot.
It doesn't mean that the whole world becomes cold, Okay, but because of the arrangement of our polarity, okay, when certain place is cold, somewhere else will be very hot. Okay, and I'll share the example afterwards. Okay, now this is from the Next Big Future Com. If you want to read about it, you can go to that website. Okay, there are more studies of Professor Zakova's findings. Yeah. So what happened is that impact on world food supply chain.
Okay, how likely will that happen?
Very likely, if let's say
sure?
it's already happening this year.
I got very concerned, but if it happened this year, I don't feel very cold yet.
Yes, but that
I still feel very hot.
Yeah, true. It's warmer this year here.
Yeah, but the icebergs are still melting, at the North Pole and the South Pole.
But certain changes are already undergoing elsewhere. So let's look at it. How does a grand solar minimum impact on the world's food supply chain? Now, northern hemisphere could become colder, while the southern hemisphere could be warmer. Both instances could disrupt global food supply, global food production.
So that's why we see like New York, it's like America are getting heavier snow everywhere.
Yes. It may not happen throughout the world, but it's already happening in pockets, part of the world. Okay, now if you look at the picture on your right-hand side, the top one, you see a lot of a lot of fish being dead. Yeah. Now that's what happening in the Murray-Darling Basin. Hundreds and thousands of fish died because temperature rose, if I'm not wrong, about 2 or 4 degrees.
Where is this Murray?
Australia.
It's in Australia.
Okay. And in the meanwhile, in North America, you have extreme cold. Now, if you go to YouTube, there's a video of what they call an ice tsunami happening in the
Tsunami.
in the Great Basins. Yeah.
Where is the Great Basin?
In the the where the Niagara Falls is. They call it the Great Basin. All the major lakes there. Lake Superior, Erie, and all those. Yeah. So what happened was the wind caused the ice to float above each other, and then the winds become so strong that the sheet of ice move against the shore, creating a tsunami of ice.
So this is a ice tsunami from one of the biggest lake in the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
but it doesn't come from ocean, right? It's come from
it's the lake. Yeah.
Inland lake.
Yeah, inland lake. Yeah.
You
go to YouTube, you look at you type a search ice tsunami, then you will see.
I would be very interested to find this out.
So now, as recent as this year, Australia saw warmer temperatures killing hundreds and thousands of fish in the Murray-Darling River Basin, and North America experienced a polar vortex. In fact, just about a month ago, Chicago temperature was even colder than the Arctic because of the polar vortex.
Oh my goodness.
So what happened is that you can see that now the disruption is taking place. Yeah. So plantations could be destroyed or harvest being negatively impacted. Now this could exert inflation on the food supply chain. Okay, because now you imagine that if certain the northern hemisphere become much colder, southern hemisphere will become even warmer. If you look at it, even us in the equatorial, our weather now is much hotter, and we have more thunderstorms.
Okay.
Do you realize that?
Okay. So how will that affect our oil palm plantation?
If let's say there's a lot of thunderstorm, okay. Now what happened was, you remember a few years back when a lot of flooding in Johor, in Pahang, Kelantan, and all. A lot of the oil palm crops they were destroyed also because of the heavy flooding. Okay.
So the output could be disrupted.
Yes.
And maybe the price will go up.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Not only that, because if you look at things like rapeseed oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, they are in temperate countries.
Okay.
So if let's say, for example, Russia now is producing a lot of soybean for China's consumption. Okay. Now their plantation is in Siberia. Now what happened if let's say the weather suddenly shift very cold and the soybean harvest is affected or the soybean crops are being destroyed? China would be looking for vegetable oil. Okay, so that is why this weather change caused by the grand solar minimum is going to impact a lot of food production globally.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about all this carbon footprint? Because I thought this climate change was like over emission of carbon.
You can control what you emit on Earth, but you cannot control what's coming from the sun. Okay, and that is what is coming. Okay, so now if Professor Zarkova's findings are true, we can be talking about from 2020 onwards, 40 to 60 years of cold weather. Then we will be looking at 40 to 60 years of the whole global weather system becoming topsy-turvy. Okay, and that is why I think while it may be good for plantation counters, because it exerts a price. What comes next will be a lot of inflation.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
If the oil price go up, output drop, then of course
you will have food inflation also. Okay, so whether is it good for plantation but then bad for everything? Okay, for example, if inflation goes up, what will happen to properties?
Yeah, maybe. But if climate change really happens, it will affect us severely.
Yeah.
Probably we will see Chicago temperature is lower than those in Antarctica.
But definitely it's lower than Arctic. lower than Arctic that
That
day.
is insane. Okay,
Yeah.
and I've been to Chicago twice, and I think Chicago was already quite cold in the winter.
Yeah, I think it fell to, I think the worst was minus 35 degree Chicago.
Oh wow,
You know?
Celsius, right? You're
Yeah,
not talking
Celsius.
Fahrenheit, right?
And Arctic was just about minus 20 or 25 only. You know, it's like 10 degrees much colder. Okay, because of the polar vortex. So, you know, if you look at this, you know, you might be thinking it's 2012.
Oh, okay.
Not 2012,
So-
sorry, the day after tomorrow.
So I hope
You know,
what
the
I hope,
movie.
what the professor predict will not happen.
But the sun is already showing now.
Okay.
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 So now the other thing is what will further exert the price on food in the coming decades is because Asia fastest growing middle class. Now by 2030, Asia could represent 2/3 of the global middle class population. Okay. India by 2030, in terms of purchasing power parity, would rank number 1. Right now it's China. By 2030, India would rank number 1 in terms of purchasing power parity. Okay, China number 2, US would go to 3rd spot, and Indonesia would claim 6th spot in the world's top 10. Okay, so that's how it's going to change the demographic of the entire Asia Pacific. Now in China, there's going to be 350 million. Okay, in India, 380 million. Rest of Asia, 210 million. But the rest of the world is only 130 million. So that population growth in Asia, and if you look at Asia consumption of food, is frying. Okay, always a lot of deep fried. Okay, okay, definitely. Okay, so that would actually be a demand for vegetable oil, definitely. Okay, but we are also facing a climatal change in the world weather system. So on one hand, you have demand from a growing population, and then there could be production disruption. So that's why, you know, the price of food, the price of food is going to go up, and so those that are in the plantation could also see an increase in price. Okay, and that's why, you know, because of this growth of middle class, as I mentioned just now. Okay, can you imagine that, you know, in India you have a population of middle class that by 2030 would surpass the entire United States population. Okay, and they will be buying personal hygiene product. Demand for oleochemicals will also shoot up.
Yeah, but not only personal hygiene product, they could be buying cars, getting insurance.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
a lot more stuff can
Yeah.
emerge out of this
Yeah.
growing middle class
Yeah.
from booming from Asia.
Yeah, but also, you know, we are looking at, you know, certain climate change that could impact. So we do not know where we stand in the next decade. But definitely, the early signs could, when this grand solar minimum plays out. Okay, I think plantation, you can readily see disruption in the global food supply chain. You can see disruption in plantation crops. Okay, and that could be the early indication.
Yeah, I mean, not only, you know, it's the balance. If
Yeah.
it really happens, it's the balance,
Yeah.
okay, in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, of course, if certain countries become colder, that could exert a migration also, okay, into certain cities that are more warmer, and there could be geopolitical conflict, okay. But it's going to be a very challenging decade next year, okay. And to such extent, maybe that's why China now is building artificial sun.
Artificial sun.
Yeah, you know, China is going to build artificial sun that they will send satellites to space that will collect solar power and then beam it back down to the Earth.
Oh wow.
You know, and they are exploring artificial moon so that the amount of
What is that in the moon that they want to harvest?
also harnessing solar power so that that satellite becomes a source of illumination. That will be like another moon in the sky, so that it gives it can allow crops, you know, like to 24 hours to get light. Okay, so to that extent, China, that's what China is doing.
Okay. How would that affect Malaysia, especially in palm oil industry?
Malaysia, I think we are still very safe in the equatorial region. We won't see, we won't see snow falling, I think. But what we will see is because we are in the center, and therefore we could likely see thunderstorm and hot weather, many times greater than what we experienced, in the La Nina and El Nino kind of thing. Because if that weather fluctuation happens, it can also impact Malaysia plantation crops as well. Okay, especially if there's severe flooding.
Okay.
So then, looking at rise of middle income group in Malaysia, in Asia, what will happen? Rising disposable income and burgeoning middle income group in Asia could drive greater consumption of food and goods. Okay, therefore, Asia demand of vegetable will rise over the next decade. However, this decade of rising demand will come head-on with the Grand Solar Minimum, which can put pressure on global supply chain. Okay, while it could augur well for plantations, which will likely see demand rising and supply declining, this could also lead to global inflation, which threatens economic growth. Okay, and governments would have a tough time managing food inflation. Okay, so yeah, that's about it for today.
All right. So thank you so much, PC, for your sharing. So now we'd like to open it for question and answer. If any questions, you can ask PC. Okay. All right. The first question I have on my screen is that just now you mentioned that the banning of the IC vehicles will impact the palm oil. Could you explain a bit more in detail?
Okay, a number of European nations by 2025 have it in their policy that they would not allow internal combustion engine vehicles. Now, what is internal combustion engine vehicles? Are those vehicles that use fossil fuel, okay, to start up the engine, okay? Whereas the government in the EU is encouraging people to convert to fully electrical.
Okay. So, can you tell us, like, people at one of the attendees are asking, what is your forecast price of palm oil for 2019?
I think I will not put any forecast, but definitely, if let's say things to look out for, yeah. Now, what could impact the price of palm oil moving forward? I think it will still all be around the trade deal, so-called trade deal with the US-China thing. If you look at it, the trade deal, my personal opinion, okay, and I'm not a fortune teller. I just base it on what I know, okay. I don't think the trade deal will happen, okay. But then, if the trade deal does not happen, okay, will US revert to a trade war with China? Okay, and then China starts to impose limits to soybean oil import. If let's say China, right now China says that we will buy more soybean, okay, and that's why, okay, once the trade deal news is out, palm oil price actually was going up during the trade war, but then it stopped going up, okay, because that's a trade deal. Now, if let's say the trade war is back into motion, then I think that palm oil has some extra leg to move up higher, because China could be back to banning US agricultural product. But on the meanwhile, I don't think the upside is very, very huge, because Russia now is moving to give to lease out land for Chinese farmers who wants to convert the land into soybean plantations. Okay, that's also happening. So while on the upside may be a bit limited, okay, again, China demand will also be moving up. Like recently, they agreed to buy more palm oil from Malaysia, which could be good for the counters within the short to medium term now. Yeah.
All right. So the next question we have on the screen is that On one of your slide, you mentioned that the palm oil product export reached 998 billion in 2018. And then another sentence said that they contributed 65 billion of total export. What is the difference between these two figures?
Okay, I think one is palm oil. Sorry, I think the other one is total palm oil products. I think that's a typo error there.
Okay, so is it the first one is the palm oil?
Total palm oil products. That's why it's much higher.
Oh, and this one is?
Palm oil.
Palm oil.
Yeah.
Okay, so one is a total palm oil product, the other one is palm oil.
Yes, that includes the oil. Total palm oil products will be oleochemicals and such.
Okay. So next question I have is, what do you think about using debt to asset ratio to evaluate a plantation company?
Debt to asset ratio, yes, you can also use that as an alternative. It's really up to you. Now, for me, why I use total liabilities is because I want to know the total damage that it can do to a company. Like if let's say, for example, if you use just only debt, then it's a form of borrowings. But what if that company has a lot of other non-current liabilities that are not let's say has anything to do with that? Then I want to know what's the extent of the damage. So that's why I use total liabilities instead. Okay, so it's entirely up to the person actually. If you prefer more at least with that, because other items in the non-current or current liabilities is not a criteria, it's not an important criteria to you, then it's also up to you. But for me, I use the total because I want to know the fullest extent of the damage that it could do to a company's balance sheet.
All right. So the next question is, what do you think of using return on equity, return of capital employed, and return on asset when analyzing plantation company?
When assessing a company, I try not to use too many metrics to measure, okay, because it can give conflicting signals. Now, why do I say like this? Because if you use return on equity, now a company's return on equity can be very huge if let's say the equity is very small. Now, how can a company's equity be very small? If let's say it has a lot of debt. If let's say a company has a lot of debt, the equity could be small, and then the return on equity could be very magnificent. So that's why I look at only certain things that I know make sense to me immediately. Okay, for example, if debt to equity ratio, okay, immediately tells me that that company does it meet my criteria, rather than looking at return on equity and then hey, the equity is so huge, but then after I do the mathematics, okay, the return to equity is really not very big. So sometimes you have to be very careful when you look at this kind of metrics. I want to use metrics that make sense to me. Likewise, you should too. You should adopt metrics that make sense to you yourself, okay, because you are the investing person, right?
All right. So the next question is, can you comment on the oil extraction rate and the canal extraction rate?
To be frank, this one I can't
You don't study in detail yet, right?
I don't study that to that detail. Okay, for example, but what you mean by oil extraction rate?
Like how efficient are they in extracting the oil from the fruits?
I think for me, I don't look into that kind of statistics for my own analysis. But if you want to go into that detail, it's also up to that person. For example, how I summarize whether whatever process that is being done, okay, is actually an improvement of efficiency. Okay, I look at the overall thing. Okay, for example, if let's say per the cost of the cost of production, or the cost of the revenue, okay, increases less while revenue increases more, then I would, immediately know that, hey, that's efficiency. Okay, rather than look into detail of the operational nitty-gritty of abstraction is this percentage and so forth and so on. I would look at the overall picture, because to me, the overall efficiency of a company matters most than just a single part of the operation, whether they achieve that level of efficiency or not. So I will look at the overall. Yeah.
Okay. So do you know like which of the plantation company have the lowest cost of production? And do you have any idea who is the most efficient planter?
I would look at, I don't look at the all the across the individual uh, counters who has the best efficiency. I look at generally, okay, for example, how I derive whether a company meets my investment criteria or not. Like I share with you certain metrics, okay, debt to equity ratio, current ratio, revenue growth, and all those. I will assign a certain so-called KPI, okay, like current ratio should be more than 1, debt to equity ratio less than 1.5. I will put this all as part of my KPI. So when a company that meets all the KPI most, okay, I put a yes, 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 or if they fail to meet, no, then I would check against various counter, which one have the most yes. If that counter have the most yes, then that means that company really meets the most of your investment criteria. Okay, just as it will meet the most of my investment criteria. I wouldn't go into certain details. Okay, only things that I want to know make sense to me. I hope that's answer your question.
Okay. All right. Well, there are so many questions. So the next question is, hang on, yeah, because there are more questions popping out, so I missed my question. So the next question is, when you mentioned that there will be more middle income population, which will stimulate the consumption of palm oil, would there be a consumption pattern shift towards a more healthier oil, as suggested by developed nation?
I think what is most important is that every producing nation, whether it's rapeseed oil, sunflower oil, or palm oil, they are fighting for a share of the market. But I think there are certain research that is done that palm oil actually ranks above some of the other oil in terms of some of the uh, chemicals. Okay, so in that sense, I think people would often buy certain thing because of pricing, okay, because of product knowledge, and also because of of its usage. Okay, so for example, if let's say for a restaurant business, using palm oil actually helps to help them to actually fry stuff much more efficiently, then yes, there will be demand. Just like if let's say a person's the consumer, when they go into the supermarket, sunflower oil costs much higher than palm oil, then it doesn't meet their budget in terms of purchasing that particular oil, then they might opt for palm oil as well. So a lot of it depends on the pricing and such. But if let's say people are moving up in the uh, middle income group, okay, definitely their taste would also change. So that is why it depends on the education of the consumer. And I think where Malaysia palm oil is concerned, it is a constant battle fighting for market share as well as providing the right information, because there's a lot of disinformation outside as well.
I see. Now, I still have a lot of questions on my screen, but we can't do all. Just let me attempt one more. Some people say that 1,008 is the floor for the FCPO, for the CPO price, as the cost of production is around that level. What do you think about that?
Now, there's a few things that would happen. Now, 2008 was also because of the global financial crisis. Suddenly it's like the end of the world. looking at the global debt situation and the way that global debt has grown almost double of 2008. If there's any crash in the market, yes, it's going to affect uh, Malaysia, no different than it did in 2008. Now, will it be a flaw in terms of the price? That could be the floor may be higher this time, maybe because of inflation. Okay, it may not fall low. I think it won't fall lower than 2008, where to be frank, because after so many years, there's bound to be certain inflation. But if let's say a crash does come, it will definitely affect people's expenditure patterns, people's consumption, and that could influence the price of palm oil to a certain extent. Yeah.
Right. So let's do a last questions. So like one of the company that you mentioned just now is Simon W Plantation, has been very focused on the downstream business, and is it downstream business is the future earning machine for the plantations category?
To a certain extent, I think a company needs to have a balance of a few upstream exposure to upstream as well as downstream. Yes, to a certain extent, if let's say we are anticipating that the middle income group will grow very very fast in Asia, definitely having a good downstream business helps in able to push your product to the consumers efficiently and effectively. Okay, but then again, you need to weigh whether that company, okay, internally in its financial, in its balance sheet and in its income statement, that they meet that kind of criteria for you to consider investing. Whether it's Sime Darby, whether it is bolstered and such, you need to do a detailed research and not just to hear from me what I think. Okay, sometimes if I can be right, I'll be very very rich, richer than a lot of people already. But sometimes we can, based on current situation, in order to put some estimate and some of our thoughts into our investment idea. But if you want to really be serious, okay, don't just listen to what people say. Do your own research. Yes, if let's say they have higher exposure in the downstream business, what about their debt level? What about their income level? Does it have income growth? Okay, revenue growth? Does it have net profit growth? How is their current ratio? How is their debt to equity ratio? Now, these are the things that you need to do a research and understand it, okay, before you make an investment.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, PC, for your time in this webinar. All right.
Okay.
So let's do a bit more of a promotion for our next webinar. So our next webinar is focusing on the beginner session. So we will cover conventional versus online investing. So it will be happening on the 2nd April. It's a Tuesday, 8:30 to 8:30 to 10 p.m. Let me just quickly put the link in the chat box. So if you want to register for our next webinar, please go to our chat box and click at the link and register it right away. Okay, I just leave the registration link on the chat box. So in the next webinar, we'll cover, should we go through a conventional investing or should we go through online investing? All right. So with that, I want to thank PC for spending your time with us to talk about plantation industry for a fair bit. And for those of you who tuned in today, thank you so much for your time in learning from us about plantation industry outlook. With that, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a
Thank you,
pleasant
Shane.
rest of the day. Okay, this is Shane signing off.